who work in restaurant chains, what should we never order from that chain? Story 1. I worked at McDonald's in high school for 3 years, back in the late 90s, and it was such a ridiculously clean store. We cleaned the soda machines every single night. We cleaned the grills every night. We cleaned the oil regularly. We cleaned the ice cream machine every single night. Our machine was never broken regularly, and if it did really break, then it was down for a minimal amount of time depending on the time of day, or if it was the weekend. We never messed with people's food. We were high as in the grill for sure, but we never ever messed with food. We were one of the biggest and busiest stores in my city too. It's always so disheartening to hear how disgusting things are in kitchens and restaurants. Story 2. As a teen, I worked at 1. A Sizzler steakhouse. 2. An Italian restaurant. 3. Little Caesars. 4. Subway. As an adult, I refused to eat at 1. Sizzler if they still exist. Subway. I would happily still eat at the Italian joint, and I still get food from Little Caesars. Story 3. It avoid the chicken anything at Panera. Ours was shredded by the dishwasher guy who did not wear gloves and would stop shredding, handle the dishes, then go right back to shredding without washing his hands at all. I also always gave the soups the side eye, sitting in lukewarm water for hours, sometimes all day if it wasn't a popular flavor, until someone ordered one. I'm just not sure about that. Edit dishwasher guy. Sorry, y'all. He was a person who operated the dishwasher appliance and also shredded the chicken for some reason. Story 4. What I've learned from this post is nothing. The one you worked at when you were a teenager is irrelevant. Many of these places aren't chains. They are franchises, and every one of them will be different depending on who owns it and who works there. Some are probably nasty and some are probably the cleanest restaurant in the state. Story 5. I never worked fast food, but please do not ever get the freshly squeezed orange juice at Sam's Club. I used to work there and the horrors I would see. The juicer thinks they're immune because they have gloves on. They wear the same gloves from the start of the shift until the end, going to the bathroom with it, picking up stuff from the floor with it, scratching there with it, etc. Story 6. Cease's Pizza. Just all of it. I worked there from 06-09, and there is a reason it was like $3.99 for all you can eat. Checking their site now, they still have a deal for $5.99 all you can eat Mon and Twos. How they have kept that price point for almost 20 years should be all you need to know. Story 7. I used to work at McDonald's and am surprised the McRib hasn't killed people yet. Weird-looking patties sitting in old BBQ sauce for hours without being cleaned or changed. Story 8. I worked at Red Lobster for a while between undergrad and law school. I would not order anything from there. There's no way I'd probably even step foot in one. Jesus Christ, that place is grosses. Story 9. Steak and Shake. Not exactly a restaurant, but please don't order the shakes all. Unless things have changed, the shake station is one of the least favorite rolls. The base for the shake is a very frozen, rock-solid, heavy cream-like mixture. It was almost impossible to scoop out and you have maybe 2-3 minutes to get the shake made. Attention to cleanliness isn't prioritized when you have backed up shake orders and an establishment that's short-staffed. Story 10. Years back, I used to manage a Starbucks. The store I took over was pure black mold in the ice machine and the ice bins. I used to go to different stores to show them how to properly clean the ice machines because people couldn't read a manual. Story 11. A couple years ago, Burger King changed the chicken sandwiches to raw chicken. The person I know that worked there said when they are busy, they pretty much never tempt them to make sure they are fully cooked, and after having raw ones returned, they didn't bother to fully sanitize the workstations. Story 12. Calamari. I don't work in the industry, but there's a recent This American Life that investigates whether anus is being used as a calamari substitute. Their research was inconclusive, but it wasn't a hard no. Story 13. Subway. Our store was super clean and run by normal, responsible people, so no real issues there, but if a store makes the tuna the way corporate wants you to, it's just way too much mayonnaise. We did half the amount and it was fine good, but I bet other stores just follow the directions. Story 14. My son worked at Pizza Uno dishwashing in high school. He sent me pics and described the process for the wings. I don't eat there at all, but if forced, I definitely wouldn't get the wings. Story 15. I worked at AW when I was younger in high school. 50 years later, I still do. Good food, exceptionally clean. The only things I would not eat were foods I didn't care for. Story 16. I have worked at Chipotle Steak and Shake Subway, Tropical Smoothie Cafe, Qdoba, Jimmy John's. I would rather starve than eat at a Subway. That place is nasty. In particular, the seafood salad or sensation or whatever it was, which I don't think they do anymore, and the meatball sub are exceptionally nasty. But it's all gross. Not clean. Cheap ingredients and not real bread. Chipotle was super clean when I worked there 20 or so years ago, but their food was also good 20 years ago. And now, not so much, so I don't eat there. But it was fantastic back in the day. Jimmy John's was very clean. I still love Jimmy. Steak and Shake. Do not order chicken tenders. They take longer to cook than we can wait on a drive-through timer, so they get pre-cooked and sit out far too long. Edit formatting. Story 17 Fribble machine at Friendly's wasn't too friendly, but delicious. So yeah, I remember washing it out and having baby roaches come out. But delicious. Story 18. I grew up on a farm. When you go to Amish country, beware that they are known for their craftsmanship and not their cooking. Buy the chair, skip the pie. If you don't believe me, look at their feet. Story 19. I worked at a McDonald's. That was cleaner than Mary's Panties, the virgin one. I also worked in an Arby's when the manager reminded us daily it wouldn't hurt customers if our cleaning spray in their food. But in both, we didn't with people's food. That's shitty. Story 20. Applebee's. Your mashed potatoes are microwaved. Also, your skillet meals are only sizzling because they tell us to put a piece of ice on it as we are walking it to your table so you can visibly see it. Story 21. Ranch dressing. It usually comes in a large plastic container, loaded with preservatives, and is brought out to a warm kitchen multiple times a week for months. If a restaurant manages to get to the bottom of their ranch container, then the top will always be engulfed with a yellow sticky paste that all future ranch glides over to reach your sauce cup. Yuck. On top of that, if it's coming from a DC in California, it often sits in a 130F box and cooks and cools the entire way through the entire desert. Story 22. My job too, me inside restaurant kitchens. Here's the rule of thumb I tell people. Drive around the back of the restaurant. If they aren't ashamed to let you see filth back there, imagine what it looks like where you can't easily see it. Story 23. Applebee's. Don't order a steak when they're really busy. Common phrase in the kitchen was mark it and mic it, as in put grill marks on both sides, then nuke it in the microwave to keep those 12 minutes ticket times rolling. Bourbon Street steak. Medium rare is safe enough though since it finishes on a skillet. Story 24. I worked at 2 Subways. One in the sketchiest mall in town where there was tons of issues with drugs and where frequently we would get people oding in the doorway blocking it. Another in the quiet suburbs where nothing interesting ever happened. One was run by a very professional manager who ran 4 Subways and was respectable. The other ran by a self-proclaimed meth head who was drunk during my training shift, who everyone told me would steal from the register and to double-check your count often, who I was told to never lend money to. You'd be amazed which is which. Story 25. I've worked a lot of fast food. The big thing is never eat at a restaurant that doesn't have a full parking lot at lunch or dinner time. They're guaranteed to be using outdated products, selling leftovers, and making weird substitutions or leaving things out. Managing inventory is a nightmare in a dead shop. So remember that the next time you pull into Long John Silver's at noon and there's only 2 cars. Story 26. Worked at the Cheesecake Factory in college. Honestly would go back and eat there now. I never saw any mishandling of food bevs. The soup is made fresh every day BTW. It's all hella good so don't sleep on it. The broccoli cheddar and chicken tortilla are 10-10. Story 27. The T-bone steak and the tres leches pancakes at IHOP are absolute garbage. The steak tips and the New York cheesecake pancakes, on the other hand, are quite good. Story 28. I've worked at Subway in New Zealand, and overall, the place was always spotless and well above hygiene standards. The only thing I wouldn't recommend? The plain chicken strips used in the teriyaki and bacon ranch subs. The moment you open the bag, it hits you with a smell like that's been vacuum sealed for freshness. Story 29 used to work at McDonald's. Almost anything that's prepared by hand in the restaurant. Store managers are greedy. They usually run skeleton crews. We were expected to be fast and accurate. They didn't care about food handling. There was no time to change gloves every batch, so we would handle chicken, beef patties, and fish with the same gloves. Grill had to be cleaned regularly. Only time it got cleaned was during the night shift. The prep table was nasty as it would get wiped with the same rag for a whole shift. Sometimes ingredients would touch the table as orders were pulled. We didn't wash our wash hands as often. Story 30. Don't get the meatball subs at any sandwich place. They are kept in the sauce in the chafing tray all day and then reused day after day. Meatball never seems to be a brisk seller, so it's very possible you're getting some old meatballs. Story 31, 1975, was working at a Pizza Hut, and like a lot of places full of teens, there were always some kind of drug floating around. One of the stoners came in and had done some acid before coming in, and was pretty out of it. Nevertheless, he was doing okay until he picked up the push broom and used it to sweep off the counter where the pizzas were made. Those old huts had the kitchen in full view of the dining room, and customers saw that and the place just emptied out. I thought the manager was going to lose his mind. Guy was obviously fired, lol. Story 32. If y'all could see the state of the average commercial kitchen, you would stop eating out. At one, I was told to use a floor squeegee on the Stanley's prep tables. At another, I saw the kitchen manager use a spatula to get a face-down broiler entree plate off the floor, and served it. The waitstaff spitting in mean people's food is hygienic compared to the absolute state of perpetual filth that is the kitchen. Story 33. Wow. I will never eat out again. Except Pasta House. Please don't tell me anything bad about Pasta House. I love the house salad and the chicken marsala. Story 34. A never order? Worked at a Star Cinema 30 years ago. Was a great high school job. Still can't get the butter topping at a movie theater. I swear it's unhealthier than just using real butter. Large popcorn is right around 1,000 calories for the popcorn itself. The butter flavor topping that we used was 140 calories per tap of the dispenser button, and the company standard at the time was up to 10 taps per large. 1,400 of the emptiest calories possible, dispensed from a machine that was cleaned once a week and probably violated at least one health code daily. We added butter goo as needed, turned it off at the end of the night, leaving the goo to sit and solidify, to be rewarmed whenever it gets turned on the next day, and weekdays might not even bother with 2 or 3 of the 4 total stations. Story 35. Not that anyone will see this, but I'll never miss an opportunity to about making the mother piece of street tacos at Safeway. Some things here might be inaccurate because it's been a minute since I worked at the Safeway deli, but trust that the vibes are real. So some poor sucker walks up and asks for street tacos. You're already pissed because you've got JoJo's in the fryer. You need to replace a chub of smoked turkey, empty and reload the dishwasher, go in the back and get more dishwasher soap, and you need to make some more General TSO's chicken. But because some MBA psychopath thought it would be casual and friendly for customers to be able to interrupt you at any time, all the time, you've got to stick a railroad spike in it and make these shitty tacos. So you've got to pretend to not be pissed at this person for burning your JoJo's, backing up your dishes and forcing you to go on a taco odyssey, because how would they know that they've well and truly up just now? You warn them. These usually take a while to make. They're undeterred. Oh, no worries. My life right now. Now we get to why the tacos are so god stupid. They don't share a single ingredient with anything else in the sandwich bar, and people only order them once the last batch of ingredients go out of date. That means you start by checking the tortillas, out of date. Throw them in the trash. Pull out new ones. Check the fish, out of date. Throw it in the trash. Get more from the freezer. The mango salsa, the fresh cilantro, all out of date. Throw that in the trash, walk all the way across the massive store, and get this stupid bullshit. The customer is baffled. What are you doing? Don't worry, this is how the street tacos work. We just use 1/10 of a package of and throw the rest away. So you get all your ingredients. Finally, assemble that thing, toast it. After all that effort, the customer looks at you and these 4 shitty teeny tiny tacos you've put together at the expense of all other work you need to get done. They see these 4 abominations that cost your sanity and say, oh. And sadly, this will help no one avoid the suffering corporations inflict on their employees. What customer could really understand all that is wrong with how the Safeway deli is set up? Why should they know that every single ingredient on the street tacos, prominently advertised outside, will be expired? How could they know they'd stand there for far too long while some guy in a greasy apron stomps around, throwing food in the trash only for the result to be the worst food ever produced by man? No, Safeway will survive, and no one with the power to do anything about it will ever even feign giving a single flying about how employees feel. So don't order the street tacos at Safeway. Or do, maybe they're popular where you are. The lobster bisque. Story 36. I work at Outback Steakhouse and Topgolf different times of the year. At Topgolf, the chefs are on top of everything and the food is handled safely. Might not be high quality, but most fried stuff at Outback is questionable, especially coconut shrimp. I've got little experience to compare these against, but I would personally never visit my Outback as a customer. Story 37. Guessing this will get lost in the replies, but a lot are talking about cleaning at places. In high school, I got a job at a Pizza Hut with the old-style red roof and billing. I was the dishwasher and got yelled at a lot. It was drilled into me I had to wash, the soak, then leave the dishes in the blue solution in the third sink for 10 minutes. Well, they never had enough plates, so they would grab ones I have not even put in the solution yet at all. The trouble was, when a party of 4 came in, they wanted to place 4 empty small plates on the table when they sat down, not bring them out when the pizza was ready. Then later I was told I was not keeping the plates in the cleaning solution long enough. I told the manager she is the one taking them out of the rinse sink, but she just told me to do better. Story 38. My husband and I spent years working in restaurants. His horror stories from Applebee's are unmatched. Edit actually answering the question. Nothing with grilled chicken. But best bet is nothing, ever. Story 39. There were a few burger places I had friends work at that dumped their fryer oil fat grease into a 50-gal drum each night, and when it was full, it got pumped down into the sewer in back of the place. This stuff is not supposed to be flushed down the sewer, as it is very hard to break down and separate from the water. My brother-in-law basically ran the wastewater treatment plant for a small town under 10K in Maine. His budget was always being sidelined, and he was doing so much unpaid overtime because restaurants in his town wouldn't follow ordinances about their grease disposal. It came to a head at a public hearing where the town council accused his debt of slacking. He countered with the data about the grease measured from the Main Street sewers, and was able to back that up with the number of health violations each of the restaurants had received because of grease fires and sewer blockages. These businesses were largely owned by members of the town council. The local newspaper followed up on all of it, and he was quoted from the meeting. He received threats from unknown sources after that, and left for a job in New Mexico. Story 40. Caesar salad dressing. I love a good Caesar salad, but the place I worked at only made the dressing once a week, and it was one of the more rare dressings to have ordered. So very often the same jug of dressing would be on the line for days at a time. By the end of the week, it was barely recognizable as dressing. Story 41. From Chili's, if you get the house salad, you should only get it with ranch. All the other dressings are bagged and in bottles on the line, and no one is responsible for switching the bottles for clean ones. So no one ever does. They just refill it with a new bag when they get low. The blue cheese is the worst because the bag fills up a pan that could sit there for a week if not longer, and it gets all yellow and crusty at the top. The only time people switch it out is when it starts to separate, and it's obviously bad. When I used to work the expo line, I would switch them out every night every refill, but that was years ago. I only recently stopped working there after over a decade, and I swear I've only seen maybe one other person switch them out on a regular basis. Story 42. Back in the 1980s, I worked at a BK. The owner was a complete and would sit in a booth all day long giving the stink eye to all of us kids. The best gig was having to take out the trash and break down boxes, because that meant you weren't feeding the machine and were out of the spotlight. You could light a smoke and off as long as you wanted. BTW and BK commercial that shows grill marks on both sides of the patty are bullshit. They run through a conveyor belt and sit for hours in a steamer until some chump orders their crappy Whopper. Story 43. I often stay away from daily specials. Obviously, there are some places who may have access to special ingredients, seafood by the sea. Generally, it's items that are close to their expiration, and they're trying to turn it quick to make up the profit margins. Story 44. Was a pretty common occurrence to find mold in the pans at Pizza Hut because washers stacked them wet. Seeing people prep deep dish-tossed dough right over it and not even blink left me never again wanting their food. Story 45. Honestly, most franchise stores are going to be clean, to a degree you never thought possible. Random, unscheduled bi-quarterly inspections with franchise rights pulled. If you fail too many times means the stores stay clean. It's the little dive off the highway or the mom-and-pop store downtown you gotta be careful around. They're the ones where the fryer oil hasn't been changed for 3 months. The hood vents have their own ecosystem, and that pepper on your eggs isn't pepper. Story 46. I'd avoid most soups, They're typically prepped in large batches then cooled rapidly. But the batches are too large to cool effectively and sit at temps right for bacteria. Then they are heated slowly again to a temp that is just high enough to reduce growth, but low enough not to burn. And that is where your soups cycle until the manager deems it too old. Depending on the manager, that could be one day, could be several. Also avoid meatloafs, or any specials that are a hodgepodge of ingredients. These were made from ingredients that were about to turn. Again, that about to turn is determined by the management of that restaurant. Story 47. 1. Most Taco Bells do not clean the pumps for the nacho cheese and red sauce pumps enough. 2. The wings at Buffalo Wild Wings are thawed in a big bin. At least at the location I worked at, it didn't fit in the dish machine, and if I was not the one washing it, it only got rinsed out. Also, they didn't even follow their own raw chicken handling protocol. Story 48. Logan's Roadhouse. Just don't eat there at all. Every inch of it is disgusting. Taco Bell. I can't speak for every store, but the ones I worked in were clean and efficient. The Olive Garden. Don't bother ordering the breadsticks. They're the worst. Again, very clean, even if it's pre-canned overpriced Italian fusion. Best to eat there at lunch rather than dinner, though. You can still order from the dinner menu, but the kitchen hasn't lost its mind yet. Story 49. Never order the fried chicken sandwich from Jack in the Box unless you are ordering inside. If you're in the drive-thru, there is a timer that starts immediately as soon as you pull up to the speaker. If the time goes over a certain amount of time, it starts setting off alarms, and the restaurant can get in trouble from corporate if their average times are too high. This makes them unreasonably motivated to get the orders out as quickly as possible. In combination with that, our manager often refused to follow corporate guidelines about having fried chicken patties pre-made because they are one of the more expensive items at the store, and she was responsible for wasted product. This means they were all fried fresh, but each one took 3 minutes and 45 seconds to cook. Allowing the chicken patty to fully fry would put us deep into the red zone on the timer, especially if the customer didn't know what they wanted as soon as they pulled up to the speaker and took time to browse the menu. There were a lot of chicken patties that went out only cooked for about a minute and 30 seconds. Working that drive-thru was one of the most stressful periods of my life. Now when I buy fast food, I either order ahead through the mobile app or go inside. Too many dangerous variables if you are ordering in the drive-thru. Story 50. McDonald's. General cleanliness. Show Mars cockroaches. Hardee's raw, chicken everywhere. Do you really think someone getting paid $12 an hour is going to be paying attention and washing their hands like that? No. Honestly, avoid these restaurants. Fast food in general is gross, and more than likely not sanitary food. Story 51. Time temperature, abuse, and improper hand washing account for the majority of foodborne illness outbreaks. That being said, cheap steak used at Domino's, for example, is gross as. That is like half binder and filler. Lots of subs chains and pizza places use a similar product. Story 52. In my late teens, early 20s between HS and college, I worked as an inspector for the family business, which was a loss control agency that insurance companies would hire to inspect their customers, mostly restaurants and apartment complexes. I got my CST, HMT, SSC certs at age 20, and I was really good at what I did. My region was basically all of South Florida, including Fort Lauderdale and Miami, which was batshit crazy even back in 1995. I almost got carjacked 3 times, but that's a story for another time. In my experience of inspecting 400 restaurants over a 3-year period, I can tell you beyond the shadow of any doubt that Chinese are the worst, like on a different level of awful. You'll never forget being in the kitchen of one place, and the chef air quote said to me, "Watch this." He flipped off the light switch, and within 30 seconds you could hear multiple snaps of rat traps triggering. I saw cockroaches the size of my hand by the dozens in some of these places. They would keep a dirty bowl of white powder MSG next to the woks and throw handfuls of it into their food while cooking. I watched one cook drop an entire pan full of chicken onto the floor, which had a 1/4 inch of filthy water pooled up, and he just threw it all back into the pan and then into the wok. Nobody cared even a little bit, not in the least. Granted, this was 30 years ago, but does anyone think it's gotten tremendously better? I don't. Story 53. I worked at a popular chain for 2 years before one of our locations an hour away had problems and I was sent to help. Everything seemed fine upon initial inspection. All food was cooked to order daily, and prep was done from scratch every 1 to 3 days without fail. Clean kitchen, storage, coolers, great rotation and labeling. But they just could not be to wash the salad greens. And I noticed most of the prep staff refused or failed to wear gloves, wash their hands regularly, and have proper sanitation buckets at their stations. I told friends to definitely never order salads from that particular location. Only order food that has to be fully cooked if they insist on going there. I did my best to drill safe food handling into the prep staff, but they must have stopped doing it all the minute I went back to my own restaurant. Eventually, they had an outbreak of some foodborne illness from the salads to the tune of 120 people in one night. They closed the restaurant, tossed everything edible, sanitized, got new supplies in, and I was sent back to help retrain the staff that I had already went nuts on for a month straight. After a couple days, 2 prep cooks got mad and quit. Probably they were the ones who failed in their duties and got those people sick. Story 54's last resort. Any of the salads. Not bad in any way, the restaurant surprisingly is very clean and food safe. Reality is that people go there for friend and fattening food, not salads. They prepped a few in the morning cause they will go bad, and if they prep too many. But the someone orders one usually at dinner time. The Dallas has been in the fridge all day, and then they just add the protein since there's only 3 salads on the menu. If those 2 or 3 salads are ordered earlier and you order one for dinner, they will make a fresh one. But if it's busy, you're going to wait a long time. And if you're in a large party, your friends will get there, burgers, wings, etc. way before you get your salad. I worked in a chain once in TBH. Anything fried that's been sitting around? Just know, those oil vats get reused way longer than you want to think, so greasy items can be sketchy. Story 55. These answers. OP asks for people who currently work in restaurant chains. Here come all the people answering that worked in restaurants in the 1990s. Story 56. Big B Coffee. Please stop ordering extra flavor. That is straight sugar and already comes with more than the recommended daily intake. One regular drink has multiple syrup flavor servings. Used to have a regular double the flavor in a frozen drink with a sugar thickener base anyways. Also, I never spit in anyone's drink, but I did give a lot of people decaf if they were rude. No energy boost for you. Just put your negative energy toward better use. Story 57. What I've learned here is there needs to be laws against franchising. If you are going to franchise your brand, you need to have a well-established quality control system in place. This will never happen, though. Story 58. I worked in a Vaughn's deli for a while. The rotisserie chickens might be a little suspicious. The heat-resistant gloves we used to take them from the racks to the packaging were used and then hung on the oven handle until the next cook. I was never trained to wash those gloves. Maybe it was the lead's duty to wash them, but I never saw the gloves get washed. Story 59. When I worked at Cracker Barrel, we regularly had to clean the juice machine's lemonade in the back. The parts were sharp and people regularly cut their fingers, including me. Even though we did put cleaners in it every night to kill germs, the amount of people's cuts in it disgusts me. The other gross thing was salad. I made a giant bin of it as a 17-year-old brand new waitress and was not given gloves and told to toss by hand. Gross. Story 60. Definitely not the soup. Anything left over that's still edible but not pretty good in the soup. Oversteamed veggies? In the soup. Miscellaneous leftovers? In the soup. Story 61. Gonna break the hearts of a bunch of Chicagoland people here, but my cousin worked at a Portillo's. The burgers were always undercooked. There was no way they could cook them long enough and meet the prep time that their corporate overlords demanded. Also, any hot dogs that were made in error just had the condiments wiped off and were tossed back into the water. He said the water would have a red tint from the residual ketchup. However, when I told him I typically ordered the Italian beef with a side of chili, he said those were the few things he said were safe, so it's not all bad. And the above issues I stated could have very well been relegated to the store he worked at. Story 62. I refuse to eat any nacho cheese from Taco Bell. It looks fake AF and comes in a bag. One time, a customer wanted no dairy. I had to remake an item because I accidentally put the nachos cheese on it. It's so garbage that I didn't register it as dairy, just that fake. Avoid Starbucks cold brew from a tap. This also means nitro. Not a single person who closes knows how to clean the filter, and I promise you your drink is running through hair and mold caught in the filter. Story 63. I've worked in many kitchens. Only one chain, though. I'd say it'd just never order from a chain or any restaurant that isn't higher-end country club, high-end restaurant, or the private community. Exec chef at now places are understaffed, hire the cheapest they can, shit's filthy, I don't eat out anymore. I've talked to my Ecolab rep, and he always remarks that I have the cleanest kitchen he's seen. And even he doesn't eat out because he has to go into restaurants and sees it too. Our kitchen and higher-end places are clean because we pay and retain good staff who treat this as a passion and a career and keep clean and to standard. Not anybody with a pulse who walks in. Edit's phone's autocorrect slaughtered this wall of text had to fix. Story 64. It may not always apply, but I was a corporate trainer for the Big Red Apple for years. Shrimp in a preparation bag, straight to Chef Mike. In several states. You could bounce that off the cutting board. And this was only in one franchise, but the chef director, their title for the local stores, taught the grill cooks to burn the fajita veg bags open on the skillets instead of unwrapping them to save time. So, I guess stay away from shrimp skillets? Story 65. Okay, so I haven't worked at Pizza Hut for over 10 years, but say no to the salad bar. We had a good GM but a lazy night crew. Teenagers and college kids, I was one of them, and there was definitely meat and vegetable cross-contamination. Which didn't matter on the actual pizzas, because that goes through an oven, but the salad bar never really got decontaminated. On a regular basis the way it should have. I didn't realize that until I worked at Subway for a little bit with another good GM. Honestly, Subway is pretty safe. If you're worried about food safety, they are freaking religiously fanatical about cleaning and cross-contamination. Like, as a company, they have a very specific ways that you are supposed to clean and cut each vegetable, what order you're supposed to do it in, etc. Story 66. It's been a long time, but when I worked for Papa John's in the late 90s, we were encouraged to dump the trays when we got an order for a Supreme. This meant to pull the trays out that collected all the toppings that missed the previous 50 pizzas and dump them on top of your Supreme pizza, because it would make it look more loaded. Sometimes those other ingredients had been sitting there unrefrigerated for hours. Story 67. Worked at McDonald's in high school. The food is real, but it's highly processed. The only I don't recommend getting is the filito fish. Not because of bad product or anything, but because no one orders it, so it usually sits in the heating cabinet far past its fresh window. Story 68. Olive Garden. None of the food is good or bad for you necessarily. None of the practices are sketchy. You'll still never order the mac and cheese from the kids' menu. It's the only thing the microwave is used for because kids are picky, so it's ordered frozen. It's definitely got a target audience. The whole kitchen is more or less made from scratch, except that frozen brick of kids' pasta. Story 69. Probably gonna get buried, but for anyone who does see this, do not ever eat the burger from Arby's. When it first came around, they were deep frying it. Now they microwave pre-cooked patties because people were getting sick. Why do they do this? Because Arby's doesn't have a grill, flat top, or stove. Story 70. I worked at a steakhouse that had tableside salad bars. You could not pay me to eat from one of those things. The toppings don't get changed out between tables, just refilled. The base that the topping containers go into never get disinfected. Story 71. Years ago, I worked for Arby's when the franchise was owned by Trev's. The franchise had immaculate stores. Once the stores were sold, it went to. When I was with Domino's under old management and franchisee, my GM was tried to force me to work with shingles. I literally just left the health department office, no insurance, free care, because indigent, and told him I couldn't work, because not only was I in the worst pain in my life and I've gone through childbirth, but I was extremely contagious. After 10 minutes of clocking in, a driver sees me doubled over trying to breathe, but I can't, and demands the GM send me home because there was no way I could work if I'm struggling to breathe, and somehow, he hadn't had chickenpox, so he also didn't want to take the risk. Jimmy John's is incredibly clean. They have an opening, post-lunch, and closing checklist that absolutely had to be completed, checked off, and the work double-checked by another manager. AM would double-check PM's closing when they came in. They've since gone bankrupt, but Wild Wing Calf was insane. At the store I worked at, the kitchen was fantastic. They just let everything else fall apart. At the bar, I called the hole in the floor. The hole to the pits of. The wrong cleaner was used on the floors every night, so it stripped the stain and made the entire floor sticky. I'm talking about shoe being stuck to the floor and your foot is coming out of said shoe level of sticky. The food was great and I loved it so much. It was the place when it first opened, and over time, the company didn't do squat to ensure a half-decent store.